Alright, here's my 1992 MR2 that I just picked up for under $2 grand. Had it painted, did some brake jobs on it, but it was making some noise. Couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it was maybe the idler wheel and the alternator, but it turned out it was my water pump, and it was making noise, and eventually it seized and it took out the timing belt. So I'm going to show you guys a little easier. It took me over 10 hours because I didn't know what I was doing. So this time I think you guys can do it under 5 hours. The first thing we're going to do is we'll take the wheel off here, and after you take the wheel off, there's the plastic cover. You only have to take 2 of the 10mm bolts off, and you can just bend it out of the way. And then you got the harmonic balancer, and that harmonic balancer's got a 19mm bolt on it. You can try an impact wrench, but it probably won't work. So the trick was to go like this. You get a nice wrench like this, and to put a 19mm wrench on it like this, and you put it to the right, angle it to the right, and then hold it on there and get someone to blip the starter, just bloop, maybe a couple of times on that harmonic balancer bolt. Use a 1/2" socket. I used a 3/8" socket, and I just snapped it right off. So use a 1/2". And once you get off, that bolt should come out, and if you're lucky, the harmonic balancer, you can just pull it off. But I couldn't. And don't put a screwdriver or a pry bar behind it, because you got the plastic cover, timing cover. So instead, get a harmonic balancer. It won't fit. You can try to get a straight one. I couldn't get a straight one, so instead I went to Pep Boys. Picked this up for about 16 bucks, and I had to cut the top off because the frame is in the way of the balancer coming out. And you can do that with, you need 2 50mm 8.8 bolts, and just put that in there, and it should come off pretty easily. It's not pressed on, so it'll come off. So then after you get that off, you want to put some blocks underneath the oil pan, and also make sure your car is well blocked, got the wheels all blocked, because you're going to be under there a lot. The next step is we'll start taking everything apart here. The first thing we do is on the right side of the air conditioner idler pulley. I think it's a 14mm bolt. Loosen that enough, and then counterclockwise this, and then take that belt off. And then after you do that, take the belt off. Take the whole idler wheel off. You can leave the bolt and the thing in place. There is a spacer behind this. Take it all off, put it together, wire tie it so you don't lose everything. Then take the belt off. The next step is we'll get this out of the way, and then the way to take this out of the way is this is the cruise control thing here. This is bolt here. There's a bolt here, and then you bend it back, and there's another 10mm bolt right down there.
What are you going to do?
And then you take this assembly out of the way. Just take it and move it out of the way and put it over here. That's the only thing you have to do. Then take this hose right here.
Up your nose with a rubber hose.
Take the hose here and just take that off, move it out of the way. And then there's a screw right down here. Take that off, and then you can get this out of the way and this wire out of the way. And that's about all you got to do to get that stuff out of the way. The next step is you're going to take the engine bracket out. So we're going to take this bolt off here, this bolt off here. There's a nut here, right about here. And then after you take that out, on the side of the engine there's a 17 millimeter bolt. You just take that out, slide that out. Now the key to it, the next step, is that underneath this engine block thing is there's two nuts. They're 14 millimeter nuts. Take those off, and make sure your engine is blocked up to the right height with wooden blocks. And then after that, after you take those nuts off, this whole assembly will come out. You might have to WD-40 the rubber bushings on each side. So then after you get that out, you have to get this bracket off here, this whole bracket that's connected to the engine, and that is the only way to get to that. There's bolts that this rubber mount is blocking. So you take, you'll already have that taken off, and then there's 3 other bolts down there. Now once you get that off, then you can start taking the engine cover off. Now I took the whole alternator assembly out. There's a alternator, this bolt on the side. It's a 12 millimeter bolt. You can use, I used a power air socket wrench to back that off, and once you back that off, you can take the belt off. And then there's the bolt that goes underneath, and then there's the bolt in the front. Take the alternator out, and then you have to take the bracket off. Now it's possible you could do this without having taken this front engine mount out, without taking the alternator, but I examined it and I didn't think I could do it. So I took the alternator out, took the wiring off the alternator, and when you do take the wiring off the alternator, disconnect the battery, negative battery cable. And then there's two bolts underneath the bracket, and then if you go by where the muffler is, you can be able to get to this. There's 2 nuts and another bolt from the side here. Then once you take that out and you get this engine bracket off, then you'll be good to go. You can be able to take all these covers off here. But there's 2 side bolts. There's 2 side bolts that this bracket is blocking, but there's only 2 bolts holding that in. There's one here, and then there's another one here, 12 millimeter down here. Just undo those, and then just take this whole assembly off. You can leave this bolt and this other thing in place. Then once you get that off, it'll give you access to 2 of the nuts behind this bracket, and then you take the whole engine cover off. The top comes off first, and then the bottom. And then the water pump is pretty basic. Just take all the most of its 10 millimeter bolts, take the water pump off, and when you put the bolts back in, use plier seal. Use plier seal on some of the bolts going back in. I wanted to make sure the thing wasn't going to leak, so I used some of that on the gasket to make sure that the gasket wasn't going to leak. In the manual it says to take off the camshaft and the pulleys. I didn't take off any of those. You don't have to. You can get the water pump in there without taking off any of the cam pulley or the idler pulleys. You can just leave all that in there. As far as the timing belt goes, I went online and got the picture of how the timing belt goes, and in part 2 we'll show you how to put the timing belt in using the diagrams and lining up the marks.